You wake up in the morning, you check your WhatsApp, you check your text, you check your Twitter, you tweet, you check your Facebook, you check your email, you check the news. Now you are really connected to everything that's known in your life. And then you run through a series of routine behaviors. You move around your house the same way you always do. You do all the same things. You go to the same grocery store. You buy the same food. You shop the same way. You do all these, you watch the same TV shows. And people do this for 10, 20, 30 years. Now, their body's on autopilot. And their body's dragging them into a predictable future based on what they did in the past. We could actually take their yesterday and lift it up and set it on their tomorrow, which means then they've lost their free will to a program. So now the familiar past and the predictable future is called the known. There's only one place that you have to train a person to be so that they're not in the known, they're in the unknown, and that's called the present moment. So people get very happy being unhappy because they would rather cling to their unhappiness than take a chance in possibility. So stepping into that river and beginning to make a new choice and understanding that uncertainty, that unpredictability is the unknown. Now you're in that river of change, and it is the neurological, the biological, the chemical, hormonal, genetic death of the old self. People say to me, well, if there's uncertainty, I can't predict my future. And I always say the same thing. The best way to predict your future is to create it.
So I was willing to be radical. See, most people want the convenience of transformation without the inconvenience required for transformation. So my grandmother says, and I love to repeat this, your conviction, what you're passionate about, your conviction and your convenience don't live on the same block. They ain't even in the same zip code. So if you want to have a conviction for something, you have to sign up to be inconvenienced. We're trying to find convictions and passion and breakthrough on the inside of our box. Well, when you realize that the box doesn't even exist, like someone made up, oh, you're playing outside the box. So we all bought into, there's a box. Well, I don't even own a box. And so when you start thinking like that, Tom, all of a sudden, everything is possible. So I disrupt people when I say, you want to make me extraordinary, because it lets you off the hook. What if you do? What if the God that we call God, the divine, whatever your faith is, what if there's no partial? It's not going to give me a hookup and not give you one. Not going to give me an opportunity and not give you one. I'm just going to go after it. If I die, I'm going to die on a treadmill, like Will Smith said. I'm going to be on the treadmill running. I'm just not going to stop, because I believe all things are available to us. I'm just willing to go after them. Are you willing? And then that is so disruptive, because then you got to make a decision. Because it's easier to live inside the parameters of, well, as a black woman, well, as born and raised in South Central, well, I'm dyslexic. I wrote 7 books. I'm dyslexic. I just tell good stories. I'm just not the one to edit the book.
You enter the present moment by becoming more aware of sense perceptions, auditory, visual, and perhaps others. And of course, what that does, you might notice, is there's less mental noise. The voice in the head that speaks, that talks to you, that you have a dialogue with, a monologue, that comments and interprets and takes positions, mental positions, that identifies with, likes, dislikes, never stops talking. That's the mind, the voice in the head that most people are completely identified with, and that means they're not present. So the first step is take some attention away from that by simply becoming aware of sense perceptions. And if you can look at something natural, that's even better, because a natural thing, a tree, a flower, a plant, the sky, a natural thing lends itself to present moment awareness more than a man-made, human-made thing. So anything natural that you can look at for a moment, focus on, give it attention, acknowledge it.
Money is a circulation of information, and in itself has no value. Gold, of course, has some value. It has some value for industry, and some value for dentistry, and some value for jewelry. But as a means of exchanging the goods and services of the world, it is as primitive as post horses for carrying the mail. We must recognize then that money is a pure abstraction. I was on a television show a little while ago with Ted Sorensen Raymond Moley. And they were having a long, long discussion, which sounded like something that goes on in a smoke-filled back room of party bosses, where they were talking about the prospects for the Republican Democratic parties in 1968. And then they got onto the question of automation and the problems of unemployment that it was making and the difficulties of transferring workers from this to that when they were only trained for this. Finally, I said, the trouble with you gentlemen is you still think money is real. And they looked at me and sort of said, someone who doesn't think money is real, because everybody knows money is money and it's very important. But it just isn't real at all, because it has the same relationship to real wealth, that is to say to actual goods and services, that words have to meaning, that words have to the physical world. And as words are not the physical world, money is not wealth. It only is an accounting of available energy, economic energy. Now, what happens then when you introduce technology into production? You produce enormous quantities of goods by technological methods. But at the same time, you put people out of work. You can say, oh, but it always creates more jobs. There will always be more jobs. Yes, but they will be, lots of them will be futile jobs. They will be jobs making every kind of frippery and unnecessary contraption. And one will also at the same time have to beguile the public into feeling that they need and want these completely unnecessary things that aren't even beautiful. And therefore an enormous amount of nonsense employment and busy work, bureaucratic and otherwise, it has to be created in order to keep people working.
Your life causes you to desire more than what is. It happens all day, every day. But your now reality, which you mostly examine through your physical senses, causes you to hold tight to what is while you are reaching for more. Now that's uncomfortable. You call that yearning. Sometimes you call it desire. But a desire that is pure doesn't feel uncomfortable. Meaning a desire that you're not resisting. A desire that is not contradicted by habit of thought, which is what a belief is. A purely non-resisted, non-contradicted desire is bliss.
I saw this psychic palm reader sign, and she gave me a reading, and she said, you're about to do 3 things, 3 movies that will be very, very, very big and very important, and after that, it will be impossible for anyone to knock you down from that place. I worked in factories. I had a 9th grade education. And it's a series of like crushing disappointments. And I just go into a different gear. I go into, don't know how it's going to write itself, but it will. You know, I don't know how. I'm the guy who wrote the $10 million check to himself and had it come to fruition. I'm the guy who had the substitute teacher in grade 2 who said that, you know, whenever I want something, I pray to the Virgin Mary and I ask her for it and I promise something in return and I get whatever I want.
So didn't you write yourself a check? I heard that you did. Is that true?
I wrote myself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered, and I gave myself 5 years.
My dad could never afford a bicycle, so I went, okay. I went home and I prayed for a bicycle and promised I'd say the rosary in return, and I got a bicycle, showed up in my living room.
According to my parents' family or the community I grew up in, I'm a failure. And how did I buck the trend? I was really, really fortunate that very early on I started to experiment with what mattered to me. Sometimes that got me in a lot of trouble. What people don't know about me is that I was suspended from school 3 times for trying out all sorts of things, like things that people would never imagine of someone who goes on to be a monk. I was experimenting with all the drugs in the world. I had multiple relationships. I was really trying to search for some sort of meaning, fulfillment, and as long as I've known, I've been chasing thrill. I really value thrill. Very different. From 14 to 18, I was like this kid who just wanted to try new things out. And my parents' rhetoric would always be, well, make sure you get good grades. And I used to think, well, if I can be bad and get good grades, then it all works, right? Everyone's happy. So that's kind of what I did. And at 18, I was really fortunate when I met a monk. And this monk was invited to speak. And I kind of just went because one of my friends forced me to. At that time, I was listening to CEOs and entrepreneurs and business people and marketers who I thought that's what I was aspiring to be like. And then I hear this monk, and he captivated me like no one had ever captivated me before. It was like staring at the most beautiful woman on the planet. You know, I was completely fixated on him and his message. And that is the beginning, without me going into too much detail before we probe, that was the beginning of what changed me.
It's the story of a young girl, just turned 17. It was Christmas Eve, and she is sad of heart. For that year, she had lost her father in an accident, and she's returning home to what seemed to be an empty house. She was untrained to do anything, so got herself a job as a waitress. This night is quite late, Christmas Eve. It's raining. The car is full of laughing boys and girls home for their Christmas vacation. And she couldn't conceal the tears. Luckily for her, as I said, it was raining. So she stuck her face into the heavens to mingle her tears with the rain. And then, holding the rail of the streetcar, this is what she did. She said, "This is not rain, but this is spray from the ocean. And this is not the salt of tears that I taste, but this is the salt of the sea in the wind. And this is not San Diego. This is a ship. I'm coming into the Bay of Samoa." And there she felt the reality of all that she had imagined. Then came the end of the journey, and all are out. 10 days later, this girl received a letter from a firm in Chicago saying that her aunt, several years before, when she sailed for Europe, deposited with them $3,000 with instructions that if she did not return to America, this money should be paid to her niece. They had just received information of the aunt's death and were now acting upon her instructions. 1 month later, this girl sailed for Samoa. As she came into the bay, it was late that night, and there was salt of the sea in the wind. It wasn't raining, but there was spray in the air, and she actually felt what she felt 1 month before, only this time she had realized her objective. Now this whole record is technical.
If you organize your mind to a certain level of organization, it in turn organizes the whole system. Your body, your emotion, your energies, everything gets organized in that direction. Once all these 4 dimensions of you, your physical body, your mind, your emotion and the fundamental life energies are organized in one direction, once you're like this, anything that you wish happens without even lifting a little finger actually. It would help to assist it with activity, but even without doing any activity, you can still manifest what you want if you organize these 4 dimensions in one direction and keep it unwavering in that direction for a certain period of time. Right now the problem with your mind is, every moment it is changing its direction. It is like you want to travel somewhere, and every 2 steps if you keep changing your direction, the question of you reaching the destination is very remote unless it happens by chance.